Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to this second session at the Ukraine House Davos today. We're very happy to see you all. We're going to be spending the next hour discussing artificial intelligence, AI. We're going to be speaking about scaling companies in artificial intelligence. And we're going to be speaking about some of the applications for artificial intelligence, including healthcare and space, and a lot of other neat stuff. So I'd like to apologize, we're off to a bit of a late start here. We always wonder, where does artificial intelligence really stand? And I was asking myself that question as I was watching the satellite navigation on my taxi driver's car go from a 3-minute arrival time to an 11-minute arrival time to a 15-minute arrival time. So I can tell you that AI is no match for Davos, yet. So my name is Giles Farley. I'm a director with ICU. We're one of the leading investment management and asset management companies in Ukraine. I co-head our venture capital and tech practice along with my colleague Roman Nikitov, who is playing Ansel Adams at the moment. I'm honored to be joined by my panel today. To my left is Alexandra Johnson. Alexandra is one of the most experienced venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. She has been a managing director at DLJ for 10 years. She has her own venture capital fund now where she focuses on seed and growth stage companies. And she's an expert in Eastern Europe. She's based in San Francisco. Joe Landon, Vice President for Advanced Special Programs at Lockheed Martin in the Civil and Space Department, is an aerospace engineer. He's been an entrepreneur and an investor in the space sector, and his current job gives him insight into both artificial intelligence, robotics, and space, working at one of America's leading technology companies. Imtiaz Adam is a former managing director at Morgan Stanley. He shifted his career, left the finance world, took 2 additional degrees in artificial intelligence and machine learning. He now has his own startup called Deep Learn Strategies, which is helping to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to discover new disease molecules. I'd like to welcome you all to the panel, and let's get started. Ground rules here will be that we're going to stick to an hour, especially given that we're off to a bit of a late start. I'll ask some introductory questions. We're going to make this very conversational. If there are questions from the audience, I welcome you, please, to give them to us. And I also welcome the panelists to question each other. So I'll lead off with a question for Joe. Joe, artificial intelligence is something that is talked about all the time now. And I think sometimes people, maybe they don't know exactly where it stands. I mean, we know that Garry Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue. We know that a Go champion was recently beaten by Google's AlphaGo. We know that Amazon has opened a shop, which is now does not need any retail workers. And we all are awaiting the arrival of driverless cars. So in your mind, what is artificial intelligence, and where does it stand today? Is it further ahead than we think it is? Is it not as far ahead? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say whether it's farther ahead or not, because I think people have different ideas of what it is. And from my perspective within the space industry, we're using AI to solve very narrow, very specific problems right now, where we can design a system to solve a problem better than a human operator, or to create an environment where we can sort of prepare or enhance the data that the human gets. And that's kind of my perspective of where AI is today. And I'm an aerospace engineer and from the space industry, relatively new to the AI industry, but fortunate to, over the last few months, taken a close look at some of the AI applications in space. So look forward to talking more about those.
And you also cross over into robotics, do you not?
Correct, and automation, robotics, that's right.
Imtiaz, you've studied AI academically, and now you have your own startup in the space. How would you define what is AI and where it stands at the moment?
Thank you, Giles. Artificial intelligence is a means whereby computer systems are learning to perform tasks that humans are very good at. Examples are recognizing speech, recognizing text, recognizing what an object is. There are various forms of artificial intelligence. The one that we have today is called narrow artificial intelligence, and that is where AI is good at performing one specialized task. The type of artificial intelligence that you see in the movies, when people worry about, and Star Wars, etc., is known as artificial...
Maybe Terminator.
Exactly. Terminator 2. Skynet is artificial general intelligence and superintelligence. And artificial general intelligence, AGI, is the ability of a computer to perform a task, multitask essentially, and generalize like any human could. Superintelligence is whereby the AI gets better than humans.
And how far are we away from those happy days?
Those who came from classical AI and were somewhat disillusioned say never. Those who are from the deep learning community vary, saying 2029 to 2049. And the ultra optimists say 2025.
Wow. So when you think about the current trends in AI, and I give this to all three of you, what would be one trend that sort of sticks in your head? Joe, this can be from obviously a space perspective. How is AI kind of coming into our lives in ways that we might not even realize it?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that, Giles. The sort of making sense of the enormous amount of data we have right now is where I see AI making an immediate impact, and it's hard to see the impact on daily lives of people because it's a few degrees removed from that. But in industries like agriculture and shipping and oceans and environments and forestry, we're in the satellite industry using AI to analyze data faster and better so that we can provide insights to those industries to make better decisions.
So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when we talk about AI being teaching machines, creating machines or creating software that does things well that a human does well, we always talk about big data, and I think big data, processing it is something humans probably don't do very well. I mean, would it be fair to say, Imtiaz, that this is something that computers just do better and will always do better than us?
When you think of the thing that's driving AI and areas like machine learning and deep learning specifically, it's been the creation of big data. And there's a statistic out there that 99% of data that's been created has been in the last 2 years of human history. And that's come from digital technology. It's come from social media, the internet, mobiles, etc. And that velocity of volume and veracity of data is too much for humans. And this is where the algorithms have started to work and identify patterns. And that's what's really driving the current AI. The ability to process vast amounts of data at very high speed and find patterns in that data and then act upon those patterns in a meaningful way. So absolutely, big data and machine learning are symbiotic with each other. Let me explain what machine learning is. Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence that's driving much of the AI revolution right now. It's a bit of AI that really works in the real world, along with deep learning. And essentially, that is a form of the machine learning through statistics, application of statistics, to understand the data and successfully perform a task towards an end goal.
And I should say for the audience that Imtiaz can go pretty deep into the technical aspects of AI, and if anyone wants really to go deep into it, they should feel free to grab him in the networking session following the panel. Sasha, how about from your perspective as a venture capitalist, what sort of trends do you see, and how active is artificial intelligence either as a sector or more broadly as something that all tech companies are now integrating into what they do going forward?
Yeah, I think I have a totally different perspective, because to me, I know that something is a trend because a lot of funding is going that direction. We may ask ourselves, why now? Because the history of computing is actually that we can go all the way back to that and say, yes, AI has been in existence forever, and now it's definitely part of our real life. So what has changed? Money. Money is changing everything. So I would say there were 3 waves. One, it's when the governments started putting funds into that, and that's where it all started. The second wave was when corporations followed and started putting money in. And then, of course, as venture capital, as you know, it's private money because investors give us money to manage. And if you see that the market is growing, right? And if you survive the beginning of internet, as I have, boom and bust and boom again, and then all those buzzwords. You know, we can be talking about blockchain, right? Blockchain everything. Now it's AI everything. And to confirm that, I have to say that what is different from internet, say, internet started and it was confined to Silicon Valley pretty much as a center, US in general. With AI, any country with an entrepreneurial ecosystem has companies developing various forms of AI. And if I were to grade, I would say that number 1 is China, number 2 is the US, and then we can argue, you know, Israel, UK, the rest of the world. I'll stop here, but I will say that yes, as investors, we follow each other, and AI is another buzzword, on the same level as internet and mobile applications were changing the world. AI now is changing the world of investment.
So let me ask, there are some buzzwords like the internet that at some point stop being buzzwords because they've just fundamentally transformed the way we interact with each other. And then there are other buzzwords like Y2K, where there's something that you think is going to be very important, and suddenly it turns out to be a huge waste of money, unless you're a lawyer or an accountant. I would ask the audience, you know, how many of you think that AI, artificial intelligence, is just some passing fad? And how many of you think this is a kind of transformative technology that you're going to be dealing with sort of for the rest of your lives? So who thinks AI, transformative technology, I'm going to be dealing with it for the rest of my lives? Raise those hands up high, please. Okay, so almost everybody. Anybody think it's a passing fad? Someone brave? Okay. So we all agree, and I think it's in some ways obvious, in ways that, you know, for other trends, blockchain, for instance.
Say AI almost prevented us from coming to this panel.
AI
remember?
almost prevented us from coming to this panel. That was bad AI. So who right now do we think is really, you know, winning the AI battle? So we talked about China. For me, it's an interesting time because you have startups. Imtiaz is an entrepreneur who has his own startup. You have large traditional companies like Lockheed Martin, who Joe represents. You have the big tech giants like Google. Apple, I think, is doing this less, but certainly Google and Amazon are throwing huge amounts of money into the AI space. Who would you say, you know, then you have governments, you have universities. Who right now is winning this? And who do we think is likely to win, you know, over the next 5 years? I'm always worried about Google just sort of taking over the world. Are they really in a pole position? What do you think? Imtiaz.
So absolutely, in the current era, it's all about the data. And those have the big data, and in particular, clean data. So one of the big problems that even many of the corporations, I've seen some of the projects they do, and when they get new to machine learning, and they're going through a learning curve, and they get disappointed with a machine learning project, because you really have to, it's like if you discover oil, that's your data. They say data is the new oil. But having the oil in itself is not enough. You have to refine it. So with the data, you have to clean it, pre-process it, look for outliers, because there's an expression in machine learning, garbage in, garbage out. So you need the right experienced staff. You need very rigorous testing for something called overfitting, where the machine learning algorithm learns the data too well, and then it doesn't perform on unseen data. There are a lot of pitfalls that you need to avoid with careful testing. Coming to your point, though, I do see a situation whereby the internet giants, the social media giants, Google, Facebook, and the likes of Amazon, whilst they have a huge advantage right now, are going to face a challenge. And that comes with 5G in 2021. People talk about Industry 4.0 and that it's going to be as big as electricity itself or the Industrial Revolution itself, depending on who you believe. I agree, it's going to be transformative. We're going to have machines talking to machines. The increase in speed from 4G to 5G is very fundamental. And what that's going to enable is it's going to enable data to be processed where it's generated. You may be wearing a smart device, your mobile, an autonomous car. That's where the machine learning will happen. It'll happen all around us, and the machines are going to communicate with each other. In that world, Google, etc., lose their advantage. That is one where you get a reset, and new players could come in and take over. Edge computing, which is something we do, and the kind of things, if you're going to do space, that's all edge. It's all on the device.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, I think that really resonated with me. In space, the idea of processing on the device, in our case, the device is a spacecraft that can be, 8 minutes 8 minutes of travel time at the speed of light for a radio signal. So when you have a spacecraft on Mars or at an asteroid like we do right now, you cannot teleoperate that device in real time. And then when you're doing sophisticated docking and maneuvering and operations of that spacecraft, the only way to do it is to have intelligence on the device. And we're starting to just scratch the surface of this. There's a mission right now called OSIRIS-REx, which is a NASA mission that Lockheed Martin has developed and is operating, where we're orbiting an asteroid right now. And the idea is there's this robotic arm that's going to come down and scoop up some of the asteroid material and then put it in a little capsule and shoot it back to Earth. So in order to get that arm to hit just the right spot and not break when it hits it and not miss, we need to know with a high degree of certainty what the shape of the asteroid is and what the terrain looks like. And with a telescope, you can't tell. So we've had to send a spacecraft out there that uses visual and LiDAR sensing to map the asteroid, and then to use what we call terrain relative navigation, basically vision-based navigation on this body in space to then decide where to scoop and when to actually deploy the arm. So it's a very early example of this, but in an extreme example.
But from a business perspective, how are you going to survive as a startup in the world where guys like Lockheed Martin and Amazon and Google are in there? How will you persuade people to work for your company, and can you afford them?
It's a very good question, and I think I'm very lucky that I have a very motivated team who really believe in what we're doing. Excuse me. And areas like edge computing, as you'll know, Joe will know all too well, there are not many people who can do it, actually. It's a very complex area. Computer vision and the minimal latency, the coding required, you're going into combining software with hardware. So we actually do that today, and that can cut across every single sector out there, and it will do, including finance, when we come to invisible banking.
But Imtiaz, I think the question is more, how do you keep Google, Facebook, Lockheed Martin from hiring those guys and throwing $500,000, $750,000, $1 million a year salary at them?
Well, if my team wanted to be there, they'd be there already today. They're with me.
So do you think are you giving them huge equity stakes, or do you just think they have an intrinsic motivation not to go work for someone who's already a winner and to work in a different kind of a culture? I mean, this is kind of getting away from AI and getting down to what motivates people, but it's an interesting question when you have such a finite resource of these wonderful engineers.
It's a mixture of equity. Obviously, I can't give the numbers, and passion. We really believe in. We have a lot of fun. When you have a lot of fun and you're passionate in what you're doing, and you believe in each other, then that's what keeps us together.
I think this is a great question. I think it's a case where the grass is always greener, right? So we worry about recruiting and attracting talent as well. And for us, it's just the opposite side of the equation, where how are we going to attract the top talent to a big company when a lot of the innovation is happening at small companies.
Yeah, but a lot of money is going into R&D, and it doesn't exactly always translate into a market share, and it doesn't always guarantee success. What I'm thinking that, say, Watson with IBM, there was a lot of hype, and a lot of money went into that project. So yes, they know how to beat you in Jeopardy. Great. But did we really see any applications? Did we really see it becoming a big active force in the market, right? So it's not probably all about the money that goes in.
Well, you're absolutely right. You've got to have a real-world problem that you're making a difference on, and practical applications. And you're right, and Giles has made the point that so far that's been mostly the social media, internet giants and Amazon. Having said that, we are seeing that spread out. And again, when we get to 5G, and don't forget the other emerging technologies that will come with it. AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, holographic technology, autonomous systems, robotics, are all going to have AI integrated within them. So you are going to see a transformative change where things actually come into the real world, go from R&D stage to actually generating revenue in the market. And that's going to be the game changer.
And Sasha, right now, for you as an investor, when AI is embedded in an investment, is that a good thing for you? Is that something you're looking for right now? Are you seeing a lot of that? Or is it still a relatively small segment of your pipeline?
You know, I personally don't believe it's an industry. I believe there are elements of AI in all the industries. It's like before we were talking about nanotechnology. Okay, is nano an industry? To me, no, it is not. Because we have the elements that are incorporated in various other industries. Well, my biggest challenge is to actually figure out when it is an AI proposition or when people are faking it. And they actually hire more people to perform tasks and presenting it as if the system is running itself. So maybe you will teach me afterwards, like what should be this fireproof test to see that it's actually an intelligent system? And will you define it again? What is an intelligent system? Are they supposed to program one another? Like, what will make it a really intelligent system?
So again, there are a lot of AI, inverted commas, AI companies out there. Some claim they're doing AGI today. They're not. It doesn't exist today. Some say that they're AI and they're using just very simple, simplistic rule-based systems, which loosely are AI, but kind of don't really do much. There's some using very old machine learning techniques, which have a relevance if you have a smaller data set. The area of AI that's really been pushing forwards in the real world has been deep learning. Now, deep learning isn't appropriate for every situation. It really came into its own from 2012 onwards. A British professor, Geoffrey Hinton, who'd been derided in the UK in the classical AI community, took off in Canada, and his PhD team won a computer vision competition. In fact, they decimated the opposition. And that's when Google and Facebook jumped in and started to grab his team. and that led to deep learning taking off. And let me quickly explain what deep learning is. Deep learning is loosely inspired on the biology of the brain. It is taking inputs with a desired output and connecting through forward layers, then use an equation called backpropagation and algorithm to go backwards and recursion for a system called epochs until you get to your desired target output. It's all about minimizing something called losses. And what the losses are is, let's say you want to, let's use a number. Let's say your desired output is 10 at the final gate through these various gate layers that exist. Then if you have 8 instead of 10, your loss is 2, and you keep on repeating through these epochs until you get to 10, which, going through a mathematical equation, I won't go into that right now. You can ask me later if you want. But this has been the thing that's driving things forwards with computer vision, with convolutional neural networks, and also in time series data with long short-term memory cells, and things like stock market data, recognizing speech, converting handwriting, etc. So these are the current drivers.
I'd just like to add maybe a simple example from my layman's knowledge, let's call it. When Deep Blue beat Gary Kasparov at chess, for those of you who play, is very much a rules-based game, and there's really a finite set of rules that can occur in a game. And what Deep Blue was doing was essentially running a big calculation on all of those moves, and each time running through the entire decision tree to the end of the game and figuring out what the best move was. So this is kind of just brute force. And while it's still impressive, it's maybe not as impressive as what AlphaGo did when it beat the Go champion. First of all, Go, this Chinese game, which is about territory, has many more possible moves and possible positions than chess does. And AlphaGo wasn't given the rules, fed the rules of the game. It actually taught itself to play the game by analyzing data on other games. So I'd say that's a major leap forward, and not surprisingly, it happened 15 or 20 years later. So I think there are big advances being made, but as a venture capitalist, I see a lot of people who say they're using AI and machine learning, and really what they're doing is running a regression analysis. So we all know that's not really AI.
So it is moving away from the rules network, to neural networks. And that's when that was a new push into the whole area. My concern is the amount of money that is going into it again, right? Because when I said we're an early stage investor, and even 5 years ago, early stage was 1 to 1 million. And if you budget 5 million per company, it would be okay to go through stages. Now the round in Series A is 15, 20 million. And when a company, if you're in an AI space, and I'm talking to you now, you'd better be prepared to raise like several $100 million. Otherwise, I don't see how it could be sustained. You know, look at Elon Musk. Look at all the money that's going in there. And the big Chinese company, they had 3 rounds. They raised $1 billion already. The valuation is $4.3 billion. How can people play the game unless you look at Martin? I don't know. So will AI then be confined to governments and SoftBank writing checks for 500-600 million per company?
Well, at the end of the day, you've got pension funds with a lot of money to invest, and what are they going to invest it in? I mean, certainly in terms of, and indeed from the VC perspective, I mean, you're VCs, but are you going to invest in the old world that's going to get replaced and wiped away? Or are you going to invest in emerging technologies? Even if they're not AI per se, they're going to have an AI element. So I think it's more about a careful selection, and Sasha, your point before. So when you do diligence, be careful of going for a company that's just copying code from the internet. And I've seen that done. I've worked with engineers, and all they're doing is they're copying open source code from the internet and saying, I'm AI. And then it doesn't actually work when you go to specific problems. So that's no strategic advantage whatsoever, or any real intellectual property. So there has been a naivety out there by some of the VCs, I'm not saying for many of you, whereby you have to check, does this team actually really know what they're doing? And do they have something special about them? Are they doing something bespoke or additional? So for example, with medical imaging, we can do explainable AI, whereby we can explain how the neural network's making a decision. And with things like autonomous navigation, that's going to be very important. If there's a crash, why did it turn left instead of right?
Right. I'd like to pause for a second and ask if there are any questions from the audience. Don't be shy, people. This is your chance. Yes, please.
Sure, why not?
Thanks. So when it comes to AI, I think you mentioned before about using data to help decision making. For big corporations, how do you see the interface between AI being developed and the current domain experts, and making sure you don't lose the knowledge of those domain experts when you attempt to throw a computer at it to learn for itself? How do you bring those two together, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, so that's a good question. Just making sure I understand. So you're asking, as we increase the ability to analyze that data using technology, what about the people who are doing that now? And I think for us, it enables scale. Right, so I think in those we still need that human talent, and then we concentrate the human talent on the unique task that a human can perform, but to do it at a much larger scale, because the amount of data that we're getting from space in my sector is just growing. I mean, we're launching literally hundreds of satellites per month sometimes. So I think it really is about increasing the scale of the humans at this point.
I think just adding on to that, you see, I think what you're trying to say is, well, if you get to areas like deep reinforcement learning that Giles mentioned before, like AlphaGo, and the machine's teaching itself, do you lose the human aspect? Well, actually you don't, because you still want to do rigorous testing to see that it's doing something sensible, that it's doing the correct thing. So there'll still be a role for humans. I think there'll be a big role for humans, like labeling data, for example, ground truth annotations, where you're saying this is an apple, this is a banana. If you want it to recognize fruits, you want it to recognize this is a check shirt, as opposed to a pair of shoes. Because if it's mislabeled, if data is mislabeled, the computer will do the wrong thing. And data scientists will still be around. I think we're going to go to a world where data is increasingly important, making sense of that data. And there'll still be a role for creativity on the human side. I think data scientists, the machine learning community, are going to have to work much more closely with the marketers. And the marketers won't be the machine learning people, but they'll have to have a basic understanding of what they're doing. And I think those organizations that can match, sit between that and collaborate within the teams will be those that win.
Great question. Please.
Oh, okay. All right. So my name is Krish. I'm from US. So coming to AI, I mean, like when the programming did come into existing, like late 80s and 90s, like a lot of universities, and they brought a lot of these courses into all levels of university, academics and all. And I see latest AI now coming into university level, like a grad level, or even like +1, +2. So mathematics is all behind it, like writing algorithms and all. As long as you make math as their primary, so that is where the question, you have hackathon and all, like a Google come and hire them, because it's they can pay more now. They have a lot of money. But if you guys AI can have academia or having somewhere. I saw there is a kid in Watson, IBM guy that like 11 years, 12 years, like he started writing algorithm. There are a lot of kids like that. So since you're a startup into AI, probably those are the areas where I'm interested in too. We're taking that to the school level, even they're like 8th grade, 9th grade. They're into thing. Are you guys doing anything like that?
Well, I mean, I blog quite a lot. I'm rated number 7 in the world for digital influence by some people out there. I have 123,000 followers. It's something I have blogged about, that we need to reform the education system everywhere. Right now, we're not teaching enough skill sets out there. I'm also a very passionate believer, and I'm pleased to see a number of women here in this audience, that we need more women coming through as well into AI and science and technology, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the products we develop, are being developed with input and work for, half the world's population, right? Otherwise, we get biases that get built into the algorithms, and those biases are being put in by those people training them. And if it's all men doing it, we're going to put biases into it, and it won't really, perform it. A good example was Tay, that's talked about the chatbot that came out, that Microsoft put out, and they, without thinking about it, and you people teaching it racism and other things and neo-Nazism, etc., in order to pull it. So I think that's one aspect, teaching coding, Python coding at a young age. So maths and statistics. Maths doesn't have to be horrible. Maybe we can teach it in a different way than it's been done in the past, so that it's more fun.
After you.
Okay, technology by itself does not build a company. And computer science is the most popular topic these days. If people go into universities before would want to go study all various subjects, now I would say 80% of graduates want to go and do computer science, because that's the language of not even the future, the language of today. But if you do not teach entrepreneurship, if you do not show how the technology can actually get into market, then the technology is just, it will be dormant. It will not by itself do anything. And that would be the biggest issue for Eastern European entrepreneurs, I would say, that they're talented, scientists, brilliant, creative. But this whole approach, we build, they come, does not work. Because before you become an Amazon, you really need to stake your proposition and then defend it to the point where you have to be like really fierce. And so I went to Cal. My son is at Stanford. So he thinks that AI is mostly statistics, not even math. But his worry is about what a human being what skills develop so that we remain relevant. But that's a different conversation.
It could be part of this conversation. And please.
Thank you. Maria Semikos from Gallup. I'm interested, what's your take on what culture and mindsets do we need in existing organizations and large organizations today to be able to adopt adopt new technologies and develop them? Thanks.
So when I've seen large corporations, and I'm not saying Lockheed Martin's like this, but a lot of them are locked into legacy systems, and these are very old legacy systems, which are not appropriate for creating machine learning or deep learning into the real world. And many of them, for example, in the banking sector, view technology as a cost, not a revenue center. And as it's a cost, they won't invest. JP Morgan have been very aggressive, probably the most aggressive, followed a bit by Goldman Sachs. But there are many banks out there, and I go and talk to them, and they say, yeah, but the head of digital, I can't push it through because we'll do one or two programs that are, more for publicity, but we can't really push it through because anything we do, we have to change the legacy system, and it's cost. And without guaranteeing the revenue, we won't do it. And you won't get the revenue until you change the legacy system and you capture the data correctly. So I think we will see some of the big banks actually disappear in 5 years and get replaced by those who have adopted digital technology and AI and the AR, etc., that leads to invisible banking. The corporations that will succeed are those that grab onto the edge computing, that do enable marketing teams and others to understand what's happening and to integrate that throughout the company. Because there's that expression in evolution, it's not the strongest or the smartest that wins, it's those that adapt to change. And we're going to go through massive change over the next 2 to 3 years.
I just want to add to that. I think that what we need as people now is really to adopt a culture of lifelong learning. And I don't mean that as a silly buzzword. I mean that, of course, we understand that it is easiest to learn things when you're a child, and that's when your brain is most flexible. But I really believe that if you continue to learn, whether it's language, programming languages, an instrument, as you're getting older, then your mind remains more supple, more flexible. And I think that that's what we need to embrace as a culture, because we understand the pace of change is only going to increase. And what you can't do, I think, is foresee what the jobs of tomorrow are going to be. What you can do is teach people to read well, to think logically, to understand mathematics, and then to be flexible. And if you give them that set of skills, they're in good shape for the future.
Yeah, I think bringing it back to the company perspective, I think it's important to keep a culture and a constant focus on innovation. And big companies absolutely can have a certain degree of inertia to prevent change. But I think there's really 3 things at Lockheed Martin that push us to remain innovative. The first is our customers. So we're pushed by our customers to solve increasingly more complex and challenging problems. So we need to approach those problems with new innovative technologies. And in order to set us up for that, the second thing is internal research and development. So we spent over $1 billion in internal R&D last year, which was doubled over the past 5 years. So we're spending a lot of time and energy doing basic research and technology and technology development to solve those future problems of our customers. And my primary customer being NASA, so as we're reaching farther into the solar system, we need to deal with these problems that AI is particularly suited for. And the third is we also invest in small innovative companies. So we have a $200 million venture fund, Lockheed Martin Ventures, that looks for innovative new technologies and companies that are aligned with the goals of our customers, and we make early stage investments in those.
What if one of those companies developed a technology that will be competing with the big Lockheed Martin, right? But you already invested in it through your fund. What will you do? Will you absorb it? Will you kill it? Will you?
So that's the reason we invest in those companies. We hope that they'll beat us at these things. And we also do acquire companies and have done about 30 acquisitions over the past maybe 7 or so years. So there is a track record, and we keep an eye on those companies and hope that they're successful.
So I work with small companies all the time. And what I'm trying to teach them that even if you're a tiny company and you're just beginning, build the foundation as if you're becoming an IBM. Because if your foundation is not solid, and then you'll become bigger and foundation will crack, that's it. It will bring down your business. And even if you look at the big companies, successful companies, say like Uber, if you follow the news and the corporate culture and all the turmoil. Why? Because in the beginning, it was not built as a company, even though the idea was that they will be unicorn, this and everything else, and all the money. But a small company has to act as if it is a huge company when it comes to corporate discipline.
Just coming back to the question that was asked and building on these 2 points, where you see many machine learning and deep learning projects fail is either, as mentioned, at the data pre-processing or overfitting stage, but also, I mean, we talk about AI as technology and that every software engineer must know AI. Actually, there are very few. Many of the software engineers don't really like the machine learning because they don't like the maths and statistics. So many of them choose not to do it. So we think of a software engineer, you know, maybe from James Bond movies, as this 21-year-old guy who can bring down a satellite all on his own. They can't. And even if you have a brand new PhD in deep learning from Stanford, it's going to take them 2 years to get to real world production level. So coming to this point, another area which has a lot of complexity, and I'm sure Lockheed Martin will know this, is server-side integration. And so you might have really smart data scientists, really smart machine learning engineers, but you need to integrate that properly into your server, into your back end, into your front end. And that's where a lot of machine learning projects do really struggle. You need very strong system engineering skills. So it's not, we talk about technology as though it's one thing, and those outside of technology just think, oh, one engineer can do the AI and the server and this and that. No, you can't. It's a huge amount of complexity, and a lot of projects fail there.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes.
Hello, Igor Reshetnyak from Ukraine Action. I have a small question related to the fact that we're at the Ukraine House here. And I wanted to know whether you have experience in hiring and working with Ukrainian engineers, which are, I think, quite well known for their high standards. And have you ever considered doing some R&D in Ukraine? And if you have, what were, let's say, the advantages you have considered? Thank you.
Okay, I think we can all answer that. But Joe, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I'm not aware of any current activities there, but I could just not know about them. I know Lockheed does have operations in many countries, including development work. So that would be certainly something to consider.
Imtiaz?
Yes, I've worked with, I've hired in the past software engineers in both Kiev and Kharkiv. I've been to Kharkiv and sat with them. I like to sit down with people who work for me. I may be that in the future, not too distant future, maybe we end up opening an office in Ukraine with a few developers. What I like about the Ukrainian education system is that it's got a very quantitative basis. And so you find people with physics, for example, who can write Python code, and they tend to be the optimal people for us.
Do you want to speak from a VC perspective?
Yeah, I guess I'm speaking on the panel of the Ukraine House, and that is a testament to the level of entrepreneurship I did see during my visits to Kiev. And I do have access to pretty much all the Eastern European countries and obviously to Russia. And what I think makes Ukrainian entrepreneurs different, they're fearless. It's just sometimes they don't know what they don't know, and it's a good thing, because then they just want to change the world. And like one of the companies, that's one of the reasons we work with Giles, because their portfolio company caught attention of a couple of Silicon Valley funds. And if it works out, I cannot name the company yet, no commercials here, it will be big. But if you look at the recent news, you guys have managed to be in a good way in the news often. You know, we won't discuss that WhatsApp is a Ukrainian company, it is not, right? But we know that they did use a lot of engineers from Ukraine. The recent announcement of the exit of Luxoft, a big outsourcing company, arguably 2/3 of their engineers are from Ukraine. And what is still lacking, I have to say that, no professional investors in Ukraine, right? I mean, there are some funds.
Well, I'll build on that. I mean, so we're a Ukrainian company. We have Ukrainian DNA, even if I'm the Anglo-Saxon in the team. I did live in Ukraine for 10 years, and it's a place that I really love very much. So I would say that part of our investment philosophy is to find a nexus with Ukraine, to a lesser extent Eastern Europe, with all of our investment companies. And so we meet a lot of wonderful entrepreneurs and engineers. And also, sometimes when we're in places like London or San Francisco, and we're pitching to become part of a deal, part of our value add is to connect these companies with software engineers in Ukraine to become their outsourced R&D, to become their outsourced engineers, because of course the pricing is more attractive, but on an absolute basis, I'm told again and again that Ukrainian software engineers are incredibly creative, brilliant mathematically, but difficult to manage. And one thing that I think is, maybe has been lacking generally is management in Ukraine. And that's something that companies like Luxoft built. SoftServe, these big companies build these huge aggregations of engineers, and they're really, really well managed. And some of the engineers obviously want to start their own thing, and they leave, and then they've been well trained also in management. So I think you're only going to see more of that going forward, and there's going to be more and more startups coming out of Ukraine directly. Any other questions? So I'll ask one, since I think we still have a few minutes left. We've talked a lot about the positives of AI. A lot of people are fearful about AI. Let's just talk about that for a few moments. I'm not talking so much about Skynet suddenly commanding all the nuclear weapons in the world and destroying us. I'm speaking about more important to politicians' lives, potential loss of jobs, redundancies, people not necessarily being able to continue in their line of work, not knowing what the jobs of the future are going to be. So let's spend a few words thinking about this.
So we've had waves of automation, and employment standards levels rather remained high. But you're right, 5G is going to be fundamentally transformative. And nobody really knows with certainty when you go 5 years out. You build a financial forecast when you go 5 years and beyond. You don't really know. You're making a best case estimate. And I do believe, though, that with the correct skill sets and training and changing the education system, humans will play an important role. There will be the creativity that Sasha's talked about that will be needed, and making sure the algorithms are doing the right thing. So I think, Giles, you're absolutely right, though, that on the dark side, and we've seen Cambridge Analytica with Facebook, the dark side is that you could have spying, because on the edge you'll have cameras that can recognize your face. Does that mean you're going to virtual prisoners? The system knows who you are, Big Brother, what you're doing, etc. And you're being tracked without you even knowing it. I mean, if you have an Android phone, Google knows where you've walked everywhere, right? You can see it. It's quite scary. And they make it difficult to switch off. So, you're being tracked. Does that mean that people can take advantage of you and your data? You're going to have identity fraud, etc. That's the dark side.
Right. Doesn't mean you should just accept privacy is over as a concept. How about you, Joe?
Sure. I think a lot of the burden here will fall on policymakers, but it's our responsibility as technologists to work with policymakers and to educate them.
Policymakers aren't doing too well these days, but we have to remain optimistic. How about you, Sasha?
The future is here. I came back from the Consumer Electronics Show, which took place, as you know, in Las Vegas only, a week ago? And it's mind-boggling that already the technology exists. If you wear, forget your smartwatch as the device, you walk into the room, and all of the devices around you know your mood, and it lowers the lights, because they think that you want the lights to go lower. And all you need to do is to be connected through the device you're wearing, right? But the point I was trying to make, we all want to replace all those bureaucrats, policymakers, bankers, but if you ask them, they are irreplaceable, right? Right? And I'll tell you that sometimes startups are saying they will write a venture capital program that will manage the fund. They go, no, thank you very much, you cannot replace me. And actually, I don't think that they can replace us, because we work still with people, and they're unpredictable.
AI is coming for white-collar jobs, too. Well, we're almost out of time, so I'd like to ask each of the panelists to wrap up in different ways. Imtiaz, I think it would be interesting if you told us a little bit about what your company does. It's an interesting application of how AI is being used to improve healthcare.
Yeah. So apart from doing edge computing, like computer vision on the device with NVIDIA Jetson or Xavier on mobiles, we also working with one of the world's leading research hospitals on areas of personalized medicine, where we go to the genetics of a person, and we're working with big data set there, 50 terabytes of data, it's huge, and working on drug discovery with that. We have our own deep learning drug discovery models. We work with particle physics as well in the team, and that means that we can do something called molecular docking. I won't go into too much detail about that here, whereby we find compounds that are stable and non-toxic for the humans, but then also linked to the individual genetics of a group. Because one of the weaknesses of the current medical system is when you think of even like painkillers or things like cancer, etc., HIV, etc., the medicines have it's one size fits all. The side effects are big, potentially, and the upside of the medicine is more limited. With personalized medicine, pharmacology, and drug discovery, next wave, we're getting to better drugs. Also, the average cost of producing a drug is $2.5 billion of cash, 95% failure rate. And we can massively accelerate that and massively reduce the costs. So that's what we're doing.
Terrific, thanks. Joe, how about telling us a little more about how AI is going to revolutionize our move into space?
Yeah, so lots of...
Mars especially.
Right. Lots of narrowly focused areas of application for AI in space, and things like analysis of telemetry coming down from spacecraft and be able to make better sense of massive streams of data. Our customers are using AI for imagery analysis and to make sense of all that imagery. We're doing work on autonomous operations of spacecraft and autonomous rendezvous and docking. I mentioned the visual navigation system that we're working on. So lots of different fault protection is another area where we can design in the ability to detect and predict when problems are going to happen on the spacecraft, because we're not there to fix it. We're not, we may not hear about the problem for 10 minutes later in some cases. So that those are some narrow areas that we're really focused on now, and I'm sure we'll find more areas to apply this technology in the future.
Terrific. Sasha, any final thoughts or any cool companies you've looked at that maybe on a no-name basis you can tell us about?
Yeah, I happen to believe that venture capital is a service business. So all we do, we help entrepreneurs build companies, not the other way around. And I personally do not invest in technologies, I invest in people. And in that way, my challenge is to pick an entrepreneur who will do no evil. And he will figure out a way to come up with an AI application that will change the world for the better, and it won't go on the dark side. And then, of course, we'll have to do it in a partnership with corporations, because without your guys' big pockets and everything else, it would be impossible to deal with. And hoping that somebody from UK actually will visit Silicon Valley and pitch his company to us. And Ukraine will introduce us to another number of great entrepreneurs.
Terrific. I mean, I see interesting applications all around me. And in the building that is in our London office, there was a small company that had one floor, then they had 2 floors, then they had 3 floors, and then we moved out and they took our floor. And they're called Babylon. We're not an investor in them, so they're not part of my pipeline. But what they do is they're using AI to revolutionize a different part of healthcare. Specifically in the UK, they have set up AI that will take the place of a general practitioner, a GP, doing the first examination of you. So if some of you have ever lived in London, you know that if you get something like a knife wound, generally they'll say to you, oh, we're sorry to hear that. You can see the GP in about 7 months, and then you die of gangrene or something. And so in this case, this is a really great use of AI, which I think is not intrusive, which is going to sort of make the medical system in the UK much stronger. And now I see Babylon ads everywhere, even on the tube, and I think to myself, AI really is here. So on that note, because I think we're out of time, I'd like to thank my panelists, Imtiaz, Joe, and Sasha, for a very good discussion. I'd like to thank the audience for asking some questions. And I'd like you all to hang around for a lot of interesting sessions we have here at Ukraine House Davos. Thank you.
Thank you, Giles.
Thanks.
Знаю, ми будем там. Знаю.